For decades, the United States considered Latin America its strategic backyard, a region where its influence was uncontested and where rival powers wouldn't dare challenge its hegemony. This complacency would prove costly. While Washington was distracted with wars in the Middle East and focused on containing China, Russia quietly built one of the most strategic alliances of the 21st century, a partnership with Venezuela that would completely transform the balance of power in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela's relationship with Russia dates back to 1945, while ties with China were formalized in 1974. However, these bonds were merely formal, with little exchange between the countries. Everything changed with Hugo Chávez's rise to power in 1999. Chávez saw in Moscow not just an ideological ally, but an essential strategic counterweight to American domination. What began as modest cooperation evolved into something Washington never imagined possible. Over the past 20 years, Venezuela's entire military apparatus has become Russian. This wasn't a simple commercial transaction. It was a geopolitical transformation that redefined the military balance in South America. Chávez decided to break free from military dependence on the US, completely replacing American and Western weaponry with Russian systems. Su-30Mk fighter jets, Mi-17 helicopters, T-72 tanks, S-300 anti-aircraft systems. Billions of dollars in cutting-edge military equipment flowed from Moscow to Caracas, transforming Venezuela into the most modernly equipped military force in South America. But the real shock would only come 2 decades later, when the world discovered that this military partnership was just the tip of the iceberg of a much deeper and more ambitious strategic alliance. The U.S. economic sanctions against Venezuela, implemented progressively from 2014 and dramatically intensified in 2017, had a clear objective: to economically strangle the Maduro regime and force a government change. What Washington didn't foresee was that each sanction pushed Caracas even deeper into Moscow's arms, and later, Beijing's and Tehran's. Economic sanctions are part of unconventional warfare against Venezuela, limiting its financial and commercial transactions. The American blockade cut Venezuela off from the dollar-dominated international financial system, prevented Venezuelan oil exports to traditional markets, and froze billions in Venezuelan assets abroad. Venezuela's response was devastating to American interests. Instead of collapsing, the Maduro regime adapted, creating alternative trade routes completely outside Washington's control. Russia became not just a weapons supplier, but also a partner in crucial sectors of the Venezuelan economy. In 2023, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov sealed a union with President Nicolas Maduro to join forces against U.S. sanctions. In early 2024, the two countries signed 340 agreements in mining, gas, oil, and tourism sectors. These agreements represented something far more significant than simple bilateral trade. They were building a parallel economic infrastructure, completely immune to American sanctions. The irony was brutal. American sanctions, intended to isolate Venezuela, ended up creating the perfect incentive for Caracas to develop alternative systems to Washington's financial dominance. Each sanction was another nail in the coffin of American hegemony in the region. In July 2024, something extraordinary happened that should have served as maximum alert for Washington, but was surprisingly underestimated by American media and analysts. The Russians sent military ships for a 4-day visit to Venezuela, including the frigate Admiral Gorshkov equipped with Zircon hypersonic missiles, weapons against which the United States has no effective defense. The official objective was to deepen technical military cooperation between the two countries, according to Venezuelan Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino. But the real significance was much deeper and more threatening to American interests. Russia was demonstrating both capability and willingness to project naval power in the Caribbean, literally in America's strategic backyard. This wasn't a courtesy protocol visit. It was a bold geopolitical declaration. Russia was back in Latin America, and this time, with military capabilities that rivaled or even surpassed American ones in certain aspects. The Zircon hypersonic missiles, traveling at Mach 9, could hit targets on the US East Coast within minutes, with practically zero reaction time for American defenses. American military analysts who paid attention were alarmed. The last time Russia, then the Soviet Union, had demonstrated such a level of military presence in Venezuela was during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. But that crisis had ended with Soviet retreat under American pressure. This time, there would be no retreat. Russia was establishing permanent presence. While the July 2024 naval visit drew momentary attention, what really transformed the strategic dynamic in Venezuela was the gradual and silent construction of Russian military infrastructure on Venezuelan soil over previous years. Even with the economic blockade, Russia sent two Tu-160 strategic fighters to Venezuela in 2018, long-range bombers capable of carrying nuclear weapons. It was a clear demonstration that American sanctions wouldn't prevent Russian-Venezuelan military cooperation. In 2019, Russia inaugurated a military helicopter training and maintenance center in the country. Within a military cooperation project, Russia inaugurated that same year a Su-30 Mk2 aircraft flight simulation center, where Venezuelan pilots could train to operate these advanced fighters. But there was more. Intelligence sources began reporting the presence of Russian military technicians at Venezuelan bases, not just as instructors, but as operators of complex air defense systems. Venezuelan S-300 systems were operated by mixed Russian-Venezuelan teams, ensuring they were used with maximum effectiveness. Even more alarming were unconfirmed reports that Russia was establishing signals intelligence (SIGINT) facilities in Venezuela, ideal positions to monitor American military and civilian communications in the Caribbean and U.S. East Coast. If true, these reports meant Russia had established espionage capabilities in the Western Hemisphere comparable to those the U.S. maintains around the world. The Russian-Venezuelan partnership was just one component of a much more complex and challenging geopolitical reality for Washington. Venezuela had become the focal point of an anti-American alliance that included not only Russia, but also China and Iran, an axis of revisionist powers united by the common goal of challenging American hegemony. China, though less vocal than Russia in its support for the Maduro regime, had invested billions of dollars in the Venezuelan economy over the years. Chinese loans financed infrastructure, energy projects, and even Venezuelan government social programs. In exchange, Beijing secured privileged access to Venezuelan oil and established solid economic presence in the country. Iran, also under severe American sanctions, found in Venezuela a valuable partner to circumvent Washington-imposed isolation. Iranian tankers carried gasoline to Venezuela, ironically one of the world's largest oil producers that had lost refining capacity due to sanctions, while Iranian specialists helped modernize the Venezuelan oil industry. This convergence of interests created something Washington deeply feared: an anti-American bloc actively operating in the Western Hemisphere, with combined capabilities that challenged traditional U.S. supremacy in the region. Venezuela's increased cooperation with Iran and Russia put back on the American radar the intention to control its interests in the Americas. Washington realized, too late, that it had allowed strategic adversaries to establish significant presence in what it had always considered its exclusive sphere of influence. Behind closed doors in the Pentagon and CIA, alarmed officials began piecing together intelligence that painted a disturbing picture. Russia wasn't just selling weapons to Venezuela. It was systematically building the infrastructure for a permanent military presence that could threaten U.S. security directly. Satellite imagery revealed construction of facilities near Venezuelan military bases that matched the footprint of Russian command and control centers. Communications intercepts suggested regular encrypted traffic between these facilities and Moscow. Most concerning were reports of Russian personnel arriving in Venezuela on civilian flights, but with military credentials. The strategic implications were staggering. If Russia established permanent bases